Morning, lovely people. How are you all today? I do hope you're all very well. I'm at the garden, obviously. I'm in the shed. Oh, got a very long list of things to be getting on with today. Great. I'm here, yay. But one of the things that I'm really mindful of at this time of year, which I'm going to just talk a little bit about with you in the shed today before I get into my grunty work. The one thing I'm really mindful of at this time of year is seed saving. I've talked about it numerous times in the past. I think I probably mentioned it the other day when I was in the garden. Oh yeah, when I was harvesting, like say with the cucumbers, there were a couple of massive ones I'm just leaving now for seed saving when I was gathering the broad bean seeds in. So this is the time of year when my attention really starts to turn towards the seed saving. In a normal year, I don't mean weather-wise, I mean time-wise. In a normal year, if I'd have been here throughout the whole summer, as I'm tending my plants, as I'm doing little bits and bobs of harvests here and there, I'm watching how the plants are growing, and I'm already starting to make my selections for which plant will be my seed saver. Generally, that decision is based, as you can imagine, on, which, for example, hop back a second. Everything I grow in multiples. So, this year, before blight came, there were 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, about 40 tomato plants around the garden, covering 3 different varieties. The peppers, of each variety of pepper, there's probably 20, 25 plants of each. So, looking at just one variety alone, I may have 10, 20, maybe even 60 plants of one variety of veg. So, like I say, throughout the growing season, I'll be looking to see which plant has done the best, Has it survived some slug nibbles? Has it grown so strongly right from the get-go that the slugs didn't even bother it? They went to the weaker plants. How copious is the production on that plant? How many bean pods has that plant produced, or how many peppers did that plant produce? So I'm looking for my strongest, sort of highest yielding plant, as it were. So that will be, it's kind of in the back of my mind the whole time, and it will be about this time of year when I've pretty much decided across most of the board. Oh, I've got a visitor, Kay's Cat Monroe. If things go crash bang wallop, you'll know why. So by this stage in the year, I've pretty much decided which plant is going to be my seed saver and which ones are my plants for eating. It's quite important to do that because, I can't remember now, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, I completely forgot to set aside any of my broad bean plants for seed saving, and oops, I accidentally scoffed the whole lot. So I actually had to buy some seed about 4 or 5 years ago. Crazy. So yeah, do bear it in mind. Don't eat everything. You need some seeds. Primarily I want to save seeds because it's saving me a whole bunch of money the following year. I'm not spending a fortune on seeds. Great. Save a load of money. Brilliant. Love that. But also, these things in my garden, I've been growing them year after year after year. So I know the things which like my soil. There are things which tolerate my climate, even though, last year we were drought, this year we're wet. But essentially, never mind sunshine and rain, but sort of say in terms of heat, I'm not too cold here and I'm generally not too hot. So all these seeds have become acclimatised to both my climate and my soil, so it makes sense that they're going to grow well for me year on year on year. that's another great reason to save your own seeds. If they've worked in your garden, they should continue to work. Cheerio, Monroe. He was just on the daybed then, looking at me like, come on. He was on his back, tickle me. Yes, so the other reason, which I'm going to come on to now, is this whole kind of label of heritage seeds. Why, for me personally, it's important. It's not just about saving money. It's not just about the fact that they're acclimatised to my garden, but it's about keeping some of these seeds going, which generally you don't see for sale in the seed catalogues. I think a great example of that, I've got some here. Oh, and the other thing to say, just this is Coco de Paimpol, just before I talk about this. I think I did mention this in a video a couple of weeks ago when I'd first come back to the garden after me chicken pocky time. Who's that wandering around? Just having a note. Oh, sorry. You know what's a bit tricky? Because I can't sit on the daybed at the moment because the onion's there. So I'm sitting on my little gardening stool here. Directly in my eye line is the garden and everyone that's walking past, as opposed to when I'm sitting there looking at the wall. I'll try not to be distracted. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that if this garden was to fail completely, which it's not going to, I have a backup plan in terms of my seed. Every year when I'm doing my seed saving, I do save more than I need for next year's sowing. In some cases, I save way more. You know, one cucumber will give me way more seed than I can possibly need. And that's great because if this year had failed entirely, I've still got seed that will be viable to use next year. And it gives me enough seed to share around. Excuse me one moment. So yeah, enough saved to go into next year. And actually, I'm just looking at some of my seed collection up there. I probably have enough seed if my garden was to fail for 3 or 4 years on the trot. I'll always hold a little bit back in reserve just in case. But like I said, with a lot of my seeds, I save enough to be able to give some away, including the gorgeous Coco de Paimpol. It's a bean I talk about so often. It's, well, of all my beans, it's absolutely my favourite. Coco de Paimpol and Gigantes are my absolute stalwarts. If I could grow no other beans, those are the two I'd grow, Gigantes and the Coco de Paimpol. Now, just on this subject of sort of heritage seed and seed suppliers, for example, with the Coco de Paimpol, I know because I get asked every single year. As far as I know, there are only 2 seed sellers in the whole world that are selling them. One in France and one in North America. The North American one, they're not called Paimpol. What are they called? Haricots de cocaine, I think. They can't call them Paimpol because it's an appellation contrôlée name, and if it's not from that region, they can't call it that name. But ostensibly, it's Coco de Paimpol. 2 seed supplies in the whole world. It's tiny. That's a tiny, tiny amount for this unbelievably good, precious bean. It's so good, the town of Paimpol have a festival for the bean every single year. About now, actually, about the end of August. Originally, I was given 8 seeds by Gary. He had originally been given a handful of seeds by his wife. She'd been on a culinary holiday in the region, tasted them, loved them, grabbed a handful of seeds, brought them home for Gary to grow on. He grew them on for a couple of years, gave me these 8 seeds. I sowed all 8 came up. 6 of the plants I scoffed, 2 of the plants I kept for seed saving, and of those 2 plants I ended up with about 50 seed. So now each year I save about 200, if not more, in order for me to grow my 60 plants, that's as many as I can fit into my beds. I grow about 60, well, between 60 and 80 plants each year. But I've got more than enough to eat and to save seed and to share seed. And it's coming on to this heritage seed thing. It's become a little bit of a buzzword in the last few years, I think. That's fine, you know, create a buzz about something as fantastic as heritage seed. All heritage seed is kind of seed that's been going for a while, open pollinated. It's exactly the kind of seed we can save from our own plants and share out amongst each other. I have noticed in the last sort of 10 years or so that there are more small seed companies, heritage seed, open pollinated, organic seed companies. There are more of them now. Oh, considerably more now than there were 10 years ago. That's fantastic. Because when you look at the big seed suppliers, quite often we just don't see these beautiful old varieties. We don't get them as organic varieties. So often, a lot of these big companies, they're selling F1 seeds, which means it's a hybrid, which means there's no point in saving your own seed because the following year it won't come true to what it was in that first year of seed. It will revert to whichever is the dominant gene of one of those two parent plants that were combined to make that F1. So, you know, if you're trying to be self-sufficient, don't buy F1s. One of the big parts of self-sufficiency is having your own seed. You know, if, I'm not saying it is, but if it was the end of the world tomorrow, I'm okay. I've got my seed. You know, like back at the beginning of the pandemic, suddenly, you know, I had all the problems with getting compost. I need to become self-sufficient in compost. But suddenly all these companies, they couldn't fulfill their orders. They couldn't get seeds out to people. So having your own seed supply, it makes sense more now than ever before. So yeah, I'm very passionate about this. I'm really passionate about being able to share as well. So one of the new plants this year, I'm going to talk about the Koanga Institute saving method in a second, bear with me. But I've just pulled this one off. This is one of the Churchill black beans. Now, this is too soon for seed saving. It's still really moist. The beans, they're hardly fat in there, can you see? So I've got 4 plants from 4 seeds. The very first one I've identified, that's going to be my seed saver. So it will stay untouched right through till, depending on the weather, about the middle of October, they should be dry enough to take off the vines. I'm going to talk about the seed saving in a second, how I do it. If they start to dry and then it looks like we've got a run of really wet weather, what I would do is get them off the plants, and if nothing else, get them spread out on the top of my drying rack so they can carry on drying in the shed. Hopefully catch them before they get wet. If they start to dry, I don't then want them to get wet, is what I'm saying. Anyway, so this I've taken off far too soon, both for eating and for seed saving, but I just wanted to show you. So the skin has gone lovely sort of black colour. Inside, this is why I know it's too soon. Bright pink. They're supposed to be black. You can see it's on that side, you can see how it's turning. Look at that colour, oh my goodness. Doesn't nature give us the most amazing colours? What's that on my finger? So when it comes time, oh, such beauty. Oh, just got to pop one more. I mean, look how that's, it's like a little jewel waiting to be discovered, isn't it? So when the time comes, leave them on the plants, leave them on the plants, leave them on the plants. For harvesting, for eating, slightly different. I'm going to let the beans get much fatter in the pods. I mean, it's quite fat. Let them get much fatter, it's a bit of a game of dare, and I'm going to have to be really careful with my timing this year because, as we know, I keep being pulled away from the garden. At the 11th hour, while the pod, all the beans, while they're still moist, green as it were, I'll have the lot off, apart from my seed savers. I'll have the lot off, get them podded, and they'll go straight in the freezer. I just put them in my little flat takeaway tubs. I don't blanch, I don't bother because I know I'm going to eat them within the next few months. Get them podded in the little trays, whack them in the freezer, job done. If, I hope this doesn't happen, if I miss that window and they start to dry, as the Rockencore have and the Helder have, I'll simply have to have them as dried beans, in which case I'll just leave them to dry. And then I'll have some for seed saving, the others will be dry and they'll be for eating. It just means I have to do the overnight soak, the boil, all that palaver. So when it comes to saving the seeds, and actually I do this too for dried beans I want for eating, so I'm storing them dry. I use the method I learned from the Koanga Institute. Yeah, you'll need some jam jars for it. So the Koanga Institute. Oh, and it reminds me also of an article that Paul shared on Planet Vegetarian the other day about this whole notion of heritage seeds and sort of saving them and making sure we keep them going and what have you. There is a seed bank, a worldwide seed bank on the island of Svalbard, which is just in the Arctic Circle. I think it's owned by Norway. It's part of Norway, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's up within the Arctic Circle. It's away from people and pollution. It's nice and chilly. So there's a massive, like millions, seed bank on Svalbard. And just recently they've selected, I think it's nine seeds from the Cherokee people of North America. And what's wonderful, the article that Paul linked, I'll see if I can remember to add it here, is, I've just noticed, am I having focusing issues again? It's doing my head in. The article that he'd posted was from the chief, I think, of the Cherokee people. And in it was explaining how they'd started their own heritage seed library in, I think it was 2006 or 2009, just to make sure they always have a store of the seeds that they've been using for hundreds, thousands of years, possibly thousands of years. I mean, isn't that great? You wouldn't have that with F1s, would you? So they had already been, safeguarding their heritage seeds. I think the article is saying that they started in 2006 or 2009, like I said. But what's lovely now is some of those seeds are now going to go to Svalbard to be kept and treasured forever and ever and ever. If the end of the world happens, we'll have all that seed at Svalbard. Love it, love it, love it, love it. So, I was digressing. Back to the Koanga Institute. The Koanga Institute is in New Zealand. I first heard about them 10, 11, 12 years ago, maybe, from my lovely friend Dave down in New Zealand. Hello, Dave. I need to do links and things, don't I, so you can look at all this stuff yourself. All sorts of leaflets and it's garden heaven, veg growing heaven. There's an incredibly peaceful, very soul connected way of talking about plants and growing and veggies. I love it, love it, love it, love it. And they put out a video a couple of years ago now, all about their seed library, because this is the thing about the Koanga Institute. I don't know how long they've been going, but one of the reasons for them starting was to ensure the continuation of a lot of their native species. They also have, obviously, a lot of veg plant species were brought in by, was it in the, I'm thinking of The Piano, the film now, was it in the 1700s? Like, didn't tons of Scottish people go to New Zealand? Sorry, I don't know my New Zealand history very well. But the sort of the white European settlers brought all sorts of seeds with them too. So the idea with the Institute was they were building up a library of seeds, trying to track down. And the thing about heritage seeds is often it might be the same seed, but 10 different people give it 10 different names, depending on, that seed might have come from Granny McTavish and they call it the McTavish bean. Someone else may have it and they call it the McGregor bean. And it's actually the same thing. So anyway, what they've been trying to... What is going on with this focusing issue? Let's bring my bottle. It's going to be another one where... I don't know what's wrong with my camera. Come on, little camera. I'm going to tap it now. Wobble. So this library has been built up. And as I mentioned, I'll link the video. So I save my seeds in exactly the same way as they do, because if it's good enough for Koanga, it's good enough for me. What I do is, with things, I'm talking about, say, the beans. I don't do it with the tomatoes, those little teeny tiny seeds that things don't get into. They do it with everything. My bean seeds. Have you ever had it, and this is why I was talking about doing it for your dried beans that you save for eating. Have you ever had your beans in a jar, and come sort of February, March, April the following year, you look at the jar and you notice there's all those little black bugs, little like flea things hopping around in there, and it's really, really disgusting, and basically the whole lot has spoiled and you chuck it away and it's... Bleh. This is what we do to stop it, whether I'm saving the seed or saving it for food. Leave the pods on the plant as long as possible. Let them dry out in the garden. Generally speaking, our weather here is fair right to about the middle of October. So in about the middle of October, I pick all my now dry, rattling pods. Generally bring them home to shell them, because the nights are drawing in by then. It's getting too chilly to just sit outside the shed doing it, but do it outside the shed, whatever. If they've got a bit damp, if there's a threat of rain due, I'll harvest before then, bring them in the shed, put them on the drying rack, leave them up there for a couple of weeks, excuse me, whisk the lot home, pod them, and then spread all the beans out in a single layer on trays. I put them in my south-facing window and leave them to thoroughly dry. So the key is they have to be bone dry. You can usually tell with beans anyway, that because the sound changes when you're podding them and there's still a bit of moisture in them. There's a more dense, lower tone to them as they rattle around on the tray or in the bowl that you're podding them into. When they're bone dry, that tone just it's a slightly higher pitch. Try it, experience it, and you'll know what I mean. So leave them on the trays, couple of weeks, however long, until they are absolutely bone dry. Then pop them into glass jars, just food grade jars. So any old jam jars, they need to be food grade, because food grade jars will stand up to the temperature change. Pop them in there, put it in the freezer for 3 days. And by doing that, any of those little, I don't actually know the name of whatever it is, that little fly that hatches in the spring, 3 days is enough to kill them off without killing the seed. I'll talk about why it stays viable in a sec. After 3 days of a freeze, they come out of the freezer. Don't take the lid off. Leave the jars completely alone to come back to room temperature. If you need to decant them then into larger jars, if you've got tons and tons that you're saving for eating, yeah, by all means decant them into a larger jar. but not straight from the freezer. Let it come back to room temperature without taking the lid off. If you take it straight out of the freezer and take the lid off, all that moist, warm air will be sucked in, and you'll introduce moistness back to them, which we don't want because that will spoil. And that's it. 3 days in the freezer, we're done. Jobs are good. Or 3 days plus the half day to let them come back to room temperature. And then I've got my seeds saved securely. I've got my food supply is saved securely. Yay! They have to be bone dry though. If there's a slight bit of moisture left, what will happen is as they go into the freezer, as that moisture is frozen and ice crystals form, that cell that the moisture is in will be ruptured by the spiky ice crystals, so that when you take it out of the freezer, that cell just collapses and you end up with mush. Think of it like if you were to put a floret of broccoli in the freezer. It's lovely and crunchy and yummy when it goes in. You take it out of the freezer, leave it on the side, and it's gone really soft and mushy. All the cells have been ruptured by the ice crystals during freezing, and that's fine if you're going to cook it straight away. Add it to a soup. It doesn't matter if it's a bit mushy because you're going to blend your soup, maybe. Fine, but you don't want that to happen to your seeds. That will render them useless. So yes, exciting stuff. I love this time of year with the seed saving. There's always something to look forward to in the garden, isn't there? I'm not looking forward to all this work today. Yeah, there's always something to look forward to. So if you haven't done it already, have a little have a little a little amble around your garden. Identify which plants you fancy for your seed saving, what's grown really well, excuse me, what's grown strongly, which plants seem to have resisted attack from the slugs, which plants are disease free. That's one of the main things. With my tomatoes this year, I won't save seed from this year's tomatoes. I've got enough from last year. I'll double check, but I should have enough from last year. So yeah, earmark them. If there's any danger that you might accidentally scoff everything, or if you do your garden with a partner, a friend, whatever it is, and you're not sure, maybe there's a momentary lack of communication, something else you can do is get some ribbon, some brightly coloured ribbon, whatever, tie it onto that plant to denote this is my plant for seed saving. A bit of old wool, so just something that will catch your eye to remind you this is a seed saving plant. Do not eat it, because if we eat it, there'll be nothing to eat next year. All right, lovelies, I will try to remember to link both the Koanga Institute seed saving video, it's really interesting, and then that will also give you a link into them and their work, because I think that's really interesting. And I'll see if I can find and link that article that Paul shared. It's just a really short article from the chief of the Cherokee people about their own seed saving, and now the seeds that are going off to Svalbard to be looked after for ever and ever and ever for all of us, hopefully. So, right, on that note, I can no longer procrastinate. I have got brassicas to plant. It's quite a dull day. The weather is still being a bit of a pickle. We're coming up for a bank holiday weekend in the UK. It's kind of like our bank holidays are notoriously damp squibs. It's really cloudy and overcast. It's humid, but it's a little bit chilly. For sitting still, it's actually getting a little bit chilly. It's feeling like autumn's on its way. No, I can't concede to autumn yet. No way. All right, lovelies, I will see you all again really soon. I'll take you back out into the garden at some point, show you where I'm at. But for now, it's a bit grunty. I just need to get on. So I'll get on and then maybe show you later on. So until I see you next time, happy seed saving, happy plant marking for seed saving. Don't scoff the lot. Don't do a broad bean Vivi from 4 years ago or whenever it was. And if you can, save more than you need, both in terms of saving your own seed for next year and the following year, just in case there's a disaster next year. But if you can save excess in order to share, fantastic. Especially if it's something a little bit unusual, like I've massacred it, the Churchill Black, which I asked Joy about this and she said originally it came from the Heritage Seed Library. So if you've got something a bit unusual, Churchill Black or Coco de Pampol, although these are becoming very common now, aren't they, because I've shared with so many people. Yeah, if you've got something a little bit unusual, yeah, really try to save a bit more seed than you actually need, and maybe get it disseminated to other growers who you know are keen to also save and disseminate more seed. All right, lovelies, see you soon. I need to get to work. Cheerio.